Love and Longing. I think you're the only sorcerer to ever be disappointed in how powerful sorcery is, Brinchar notes as Vernon waits with Mironoir for the next round. The time between them is growing shorter and shorter. At most, between the next round and the last one will be a half hour of time. It helps to turn the last few rounds into as much an endurance test as one of forging skill, power, and control. Well, I'm here to test myself. There is no test with sorcery. The whole style is designed to attack the strengths of an Apuk warrior and leave them helpless. Bringing in sorcery is... I'm glad I used it in the quarterfinals and not in the finals, as just straight-up winning the top spot wouldn't be good. I think I'll need to consider this a human thing. So many men competing with each other puts the need to excel in your gut. Brinchar notes, and Vernon shrugs. Oh, probably there's... Hello? Vernon begins to answer before a young Apuk followed by a floating tray runs in. Fan gifts, Mr. Sorcerer? Sorcerers, sir? She says nervously. It's all right, kid, we don't bite, Vernon remarks. Unless you'd prefer it, Brinchar adds, and Vernon shoots him a shocked look as the delivery girl blushes neon. No, Communicator here, please, she asks, holding out a data slate for Vernon, who chuckles and taps his communicator to it. Calm down, young lady, the cretin was just being a tease. Vernon remarks kindly, and she nods before rushing off before he can continue. He gives Mironoir a sideways look with a smile. It's astounding that I'd get fan mail and gifts, however. I honestly don't see myself as the type worthy of such. That's some more culture clash. Men get a lot of attention outside your hell pit portion of the galaxy and here on Serbo. A fair amount more, especially warrior-sorcerer men. Almost unheard of. You and your wife have walked from the pages of fantasy novels and little girls' deepest dreams. Brinchar notes as he stands up and regards the gifts. Some sweets, a few drinks, what looks to be several pairs of already worn underthings, and what appears to be an entire stack of poetry and formally written propositions, half buried under a small mountain of flowers, formally grown and freshly picked from the wilds alike. Brinchar notes with a wide smile and a clear laugh in his voice. Nice to know my husband is so well regarded. Mironoir notes as she quickly gathers up the propositions and poetry. I'll handle these, though. Perhaps we could share a drink, she asks. I'd love to. These are all sent without a name attached? The Secret Soiree Society? Vernon notes as he looks at a little signature scribbled onto the side with marker. I know them. I'm a partial owner of the local branch, in fact. It's actually a business conglomeration. They have branches on hundreds of worlds. Basically, you pay them to deliver things for you and they keep no records. It's part of the contract, all hush-hush, all secret. They also buy things if you supply them the money and pay the fees. I'll wager that each of these came from a different woman. Brinchar explains, and Vernon nods amicably. They're normally used just like this, to send propositions to men and feel out their reactions without possibly spoiling a friendship. Mironoir says, and Vernon nods before taking off the top from the drink and giving it a sniff. He raises an eyebrow at the smell. Sweet, but there's something familiar in this, he says before taking a sip. Almonds? He asks before he pauses. Brinchar, do you have a bioscanner? What? Wait. What's an almond? The sorcerer asks in suspicion. A type of seed that's widely eaten back home, but before selected breeding, the trees it grew from had to be modified to drain away the poison. Vernon says slowly, and Mironoir gasps as she takes the drink away from Vernon. Brinchar pulls out a scanner and runs it. Trelline extract. Not lethal, but enough to leave someone in agony for hours after just a taste, Brinchar says, and Vernon's eyebrow goes up. Is it dangerous for humans? He asks, and Brinchar turns the scanner on him. After a few moments, his eyebrows go up. Are you aware you have a sack of high-grade acid among your internal organs? He asks. That's the stomach, Vernon replies. Oh, well, the Trelline isn't getting past it. You have traces in your mouth and throat, but it's being destroyed by the acid in your gut, Brinchar says. This is very serious. There's already been some anonymous complaints about non-Apuk being allowed into the tournament, and requests that you be disqualified for using a weapon or using time manipulation or sorcery against your foes for leaving them helpless. Zien Hut? Mironoir asks with a hiss. It's possible. Everything has been done anonymously. We can't throw blame, though. A few attempts like this are a sign of desperation. Someone wants you out of the tournament, that much is clear, but nothing solid on who, and we need solid information on the who, otherwise we can't prosecute. There have been misblamed champions in the past, and it's led to a system where proof is desperately needed. I suppose the best revenge is to tear them apart without cheating as well, Vernon remarks. Still, for all the talk about doing things honorably, we now have to put up with this nonsense. Hypocrisy is rampant no matter the race, Vernon remarks as he cracks his neck and back before rolling his shoulders and frowns. I'm sure whoever sent the Trelaine is going to be very disappointed that all they did was encourage you, Bryn Char says, and Vernon nods. Just be careful. If they're willing to do this to get one over on you, then there's no way to tell exactly how far they're willing to go against both dignity and honor to win. Mironoir warns him, and he cuddles up close. You'd be getting a kiss if I didn't have that Trelaine on my lips, he says, hugging her. Speaking of, I think I might be able to figure out who sent it. It likely won't count as proof, but it will help us figure things out, Vernon says before taking the spiked drink from Mironoir. Keep the scanner on. I know how to nullify this, he says before sticking his finger into the drink, and after a few moments of consideration, he takes it out. Scan, please. Trelaine extract is in trace amounts at most. The little amounts sticking to the side are all there is. Not even enough left to give a child more than a slightly upset stomach, Bryn Char confirms. That is such a useful skill. I know, right? Cheers, Vernon says before drinking down the gift to the halfway point. Vernon, really? Mironoir chides him. I can honestly say I drank a large amount of it. So when there's a smug smirk or open confusion when this becomes known, we'll have a good idea who it is. Or confirmation, as it's likely Zeanhute, he says. Regardless, drinking from a tainted glass is bad enough. Dear goodness, how is it that you're more reckless off the arena than upon it? What if there was some kind of capsule in the middle designed to dissolve in contact with the air and then add another kind of poison? She asks, and Vernon blinks at the idea before considering, thinking, and then looking toward Bryn Char. Is that even possible? Technically, but a bioscanner can catch those, Bryn Char remarks. Well, regardless, I can safely say I drank it. Enough for a dangerous dose, and I'm going to win the next round, and if the cheater makes it into the finals, I'll do what I can to expose them. Just focus on not getting hurt. The last 2 rounds of a shellcracker tournament are generally extremely dangerous whether there's honor in the ring or not, Mironoir says before kissing him on the forehead. Now get out there and show them that underhanded tactics are the sign of a coward. Yes, my love, Vernon says. Don't you worry. This round, more than any other, is going to be myself at my most elusive, he promises before leaning in to hold his forehead against hers for a moment. Remember your promise. If it turns against you, give them everything. A time-commanding sorcerer who can conjure weapons at will? I think that would be a bit much for nearly anyone to handle, he says before hugging her again. The next round is about to start. I think it would be wise for you to go, Bryn Char says, and Vernon nods, then vanishes. Quick, isn't he? Bryn Char notes. The arena erupts into cheers as just as the match ends, Vernon is already in place and ready for the next round. The losers are helped out, and the winner Zeanhute gives him a deep glare as she stalks out of the arena and into the back. He offers her a smirk. Best of luck next round, Vernon says, and she growls. He makes a note at just how badly hurt the losers are. One is being wheeled out on a floating gurney, and 2 have broken arms. One is missing a horn, and the last one is holding her tail with tears in her eyes. Zeanhute fights mean. To pass the time, he regards the images for the contestants on the screen. He's of course there with his palm on the glowing tree. There's another with her fists engulfed in green flame holding the shell of her opponent, with opponent still in it, over her head, and clearly crushing it with a gleeful smile. Another is making a kick that seems to defy biological mechanics as she gets an opponent holding her from behind in the top of the head. The next has the image of an Apuk standing beside herself, and the opponent hitting the illusionary Apuk and getting her shell shattered as she does so. The next is sending her opponent flying with an uppercut, and the last is slamming hers into the arena floor like a rag doll. Soon enough, they rush out, and as Vernon is focused on the fact he was nearly poisoned, he's not really listening to Goyida's commentary. He gives a little wave when he hears his name, and there's a remark that he's taking this deadly seriously, which is fair, but he waits for that single indication, his mind clear, his plan formed, and his will razor-sharp. The match begins, and all of space shifts. He's instantly gone, and behind an opponent, a look of manic focus on his face as he makes a quick gesture. Reality ripples, and her shell falls apart. Before she can react, he's simply gone again to deliver a kick to the shell of the opponent opposite of her. The sheer force of the blow craters the shell and inverts its shape from the sheer force. The poor, unsuspecting warrior is launched across the arena with her armor reduced to shrapnel. The next one is onto him and spins to expel an enormous concussive wave of blue fire tinged with green directly at him as he appears behind her, but he's already prepared. He warps space so that the fire is redirected to engulf the next opponent from within her shell. It erupts, and the sheer shock of what happened shocks the fire breather just enough to disrupt the enormous cascade of flame and offers all the time Vernon needs to make a circular gesture to warp the space in and around her shell, to slice it with portals and leave it in pieces around the arena. Then he's gone, still with a look of utter focus on his face, to reappear near his last opponent who braces herself. He warps again to dodge a brutally fast swing as if reality suddenly had a glitch. 2 follow-up punches are dodged by him blinking around like in a warping, stuttering pattern, as if he's some kind of illusion, but they're followed by a leg sweep that finds him solid and takes him off the ground. A savage punch sends him flying, but space itself warps under his will, and he turns it into a boosted flying shoulder tackle into her shell, which buckles the armor, but doesn't break it. This one is very well made. She then vanishes in her own teleport, and he simply follows her through and shifts his exit point ever so, allowing him the space to finish his destruction of her shell with a brutal mid-air kick. It's over, it's done. Next round, he'll show that poisoning bitch exactly what you get for trying something so low down and dirty after preaching about. "Where did that come from?" his last opponent asks him in shock and pulling him out of his dark and angry thoughts. "Last round, the woods did all the work. It wasn't fair, so this round I put in twice as much effort to make up for it." He lies while forcing down the anger but not letting it go. "So you're saying that using sorcery was unfair? You, the sorcerer, saying sorcery is unfair?" she demands, and he shrugs. "It's too powerful. This tournament is a test of the contestant's strength, not the strength of the woods. Sorcery is about bringing in the woods to augment one's strength. It was a distinctly unfair move." "Well, that isn't it, girls? Our sorceress contender is reluctant to use his most powerful trick. Too strong, he calls it. Unfair, he thinks his sorcery is. What a contestant! What a competition! This is the second fastest round, beaten out only by his own record of less than 2 seconds. Thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be getting out of everyone's way," Vernon remarks before vanishing back to Mironoir's side in another teleport. The Bounty Hunters. The Scorchin and Lynn families are done like dinner with our assassins safely held here in this compound. The last loyal members of both are well known and ready for mop-up. Bike reports from his place in the small conference hall. "Are they going to stay loyal? Treachery is a weapon that's hard to put down," Agenda asks curiously. "I'm willing to take a lot of different girls into my care, but inviting a knife into my back is another matter entirely. It took a fair amount of talking to get them to come around. Most weren't even considering until I explained exactly how and where I got their contact information. They didn't backstab things for their own sake, but for the sake of their husbands. So long as you treat those men well and let those women have fair access to them, then they'll think it's a good deal on their side. The vast, vast majority of these girls, with maybe 2 exceptions out of dozens, were all low-ranked bitchwork girls that had little to no hope of advancement, and they knew it. Give them a chance to rise through the ranks in your crew, and you'll have their loyalty." Bike answers, and Agenda nods as she considers. "Very good. And speaking of recruits, Air Farce, is it? You said the negotiations went well? How well?" "They're willing to come to the table and talk. They've been burnt before and hounded by the previous gangs looking to recruit. Most of them just want to have fun," Air Farce says from his position on his Canador girlfriend. Wife? From the lap of Onyx, the jet-black Canador woman with yellow highlights he's been fucking ever since that wild ride through the canyon some weeks ago. "Oh, and before I forget, I finished my little part of the plans. Here's the serial killer from the tent city, what's left at any rate. The large super predator remarks as she picks up a wet sack from beside the chair she's sitting on and tosses it into the center of the room. The wet splat and the sound of bone impacting metal tells everyone with half a brain cell there's a decapitated head in there. "Where'd you put the rest?" Agenda asks the larger predator in curiosity. "I paraded it around to let everyone know who she was and why she was dead before taking requests. The rest of the body is in the newest septic pit of the city," Onyx replies, and Agenda considers for a moment. "Say, a girl like you could be a real—" "I'm a bounty hunter, and I've got my man here. He's a bounty hunter. You want us around, you offer some bounties," Onyx replies, and Agenda snorts in amusement. "Fine. Can't blame a girl for trying to recruit talent. You haven't tried to recruit the men. I've got a bargain with them and their admiral. I get my 10, but that means I have to play nice with the rest of them, which means no kidnapping and no trying to strong-arm the others. Which is a real pity because the men off that ship are exactly as the ship's name describes. Dauntless." Agenda remarks, even as she picks up and nuzzles her Miles. "Oh, come on, really? We're in the middle of a debriefing," Miles asks in an amused tone before he sat down again. "By the way, Franklin, that stream of yours crashed halfway through the doctor's appointment. What happened after Butcher Bitch and Thunder Thought bit it?" "It was already too late. Their hostages were hours dead by the time we got there," Franklin remarks as he slumps in his seat. "So, yeah, not really a win." He groans. "You beat those witches like drums, shattered them body, mind, and soul, and showed it to the world." Miles remarks, "I should have just killed them both and been done with it." "It took you an hour to kill them both. If you were hours late, then it was too late by the time you went after them to begin with," Agenda remarks. "Can you people just let me shift through the irrational guilt already? I know this is stupid, but it's happening anyways." Franklin grumps. "You're seeing the shrink. No arguments." Miles orders, and Franklin gives a thumbs up. "Don't worry, I've got my first appointment penned in. After Big Mama's boys and the slaves, I'm low priority," he says. "That puts you months down the track," Beck remarks. "I'm liable to chew through my issues and get over it on my own. You bet your bottom dollar I'm not going to knock someone down the list. Anyways, the northern chunk of this continent is clear. The farmland is once again safe to till and grow in, although I left a lot of burnt-out sea serpent fossils lying around. I think those will be more features in the area. We've also completely ruined the Sky Marauders. Their fortress is vulnerable, their leaders are dead, and their cannons are still completely salvageable. We also got more than enough to count as our pay from there, provided that we can get a favor out of you guys," Pukey explains. "What kind of favor?" Agenda asks in a suspicious tone. Pukey puts up his hands in mock surrender. "Nothing strenuous, I assure you. Franklin developed some minor charms to render our weapons completely silent regardless of size. If we can get the secret of manufacturing them, then this trip has paid for itself. Stealth is valuable in a lot of missions, and the biggest weakness of a gun is usually how loud it is. Already working on it. Stick around a few days and I'll finish a machine for producing them en masse. I'll give you a copy of the blueprints and the first working prototype," Franklin promises. "Then all accounts are paid in full, and it's been a pleasure working with professionals. Kind of sad that a bunch of pirates are more organized and intelligent than most of the law enforcement we've worked with," Pukey remarks, and Agenda snorts in amusement. "Oh, that's not a mystery," Onyx adds before Agenda can. "Officers are unionized. Many of them can't be fired unless they well and truly screw up in a public manner. Bounty hunters have no safety net. Pirates have a distinct lack of a safety net. The stupid get forced out of the profession fairly quickly if they don't get killed. You have to be smart and tough to live against the law." "Speaking of against the law, I've been doing some digging. That organ farm really bothered me. We have healing comas available. They were being used on the girls. Why would you need to rip out someone's organs when you can grow your own back, and the only negative side effect is that you're younger?" Mustard says before he tosses a data chip to the table on the center of the room in disgust. "Clearly, you found something disgusting," Miles notes. "Yes and no, just really disappointing. There are a whole gaggle of religions and cultures that are severely against the use of healing comas, and they often overlap with those who are against the use of cybernetic prosthetics. So that's where the organs go. There are 3 front companies that these organ runners used, and they supplied about 7 worlds with some inroads into an 8th. Mustard explains at length. So they were selling them to legitimate businesses? Miles asks. Yes, I've got a few letters of heartfelt thanks from people who've had their lives or those of loved ones saved by what was ripped out of those poor girls. I'll be writing some awkward letters of my own then, Agenda remarks. You're taking responsibility, madam? Mustard asks respectfully. It is mine to take. After seeing the sheer madness that you boys have gotten up to last night, watching everything happen and weighing both the benefits and downsides, I've come to an important decision, she says effortlessly, commanding the entire room's attention. This world is ours. All the competition has been wiped away by you wonderful young men, so I'll be taking it over. To that end, I've also been considering how it should be run, and I've taken inspiration from the older times of Marcus's own homelands. As a republic or empire? Marcus asks curiously, thinking about both states of ancient Rome. Empire, however, there will be a condition to gain noble rights, which is combat service. All members of the absorbed gangs, the guards and police that kept to their posts, if they sign up that air biker gang, those will be the sorts of people with the loudest say in this society. It keeps the strong and active willing to be a part of this, as they'll all have a say. My own office will be mostly ceremonial and diplomatic with the Ambassador Vuni Luxed in my pocket. Agenda explains, and the men glance around but keep silent. The conversation had made that final push to over their pay grade, and it was time to pay careful attention. Have you already gotten started? Onyx asks curiously. I was hoping someone would ask that. Agenda says to Miles' shock. Now's the perfect time, Ambassador Luxed, she says into a communicator, and the door to the conference hall opens. Out walks a BMC 1/100-61A Volpeer. Her gaze isn't so much fixed on Agenda as Miles right next to her. Her race's extreme sensitivity to pheromones tells the whole room exactly how Agenda got this deal through. The ambassador slinks through the room before sitting right next to Miles, sandwiching him between herself and Agenda. She's fidgeting so hard that it's clear that they've got maybe 10 minutes before she's impregnating herself on him no matter who's watching. The woman is boiling in her hormones. So the paperwork is drawn up? Vucha is the heart of a small empire now? Pukey asks warily. No. And yes, Lady Lilpaw is now registered as a Grand Duchess. All of you are dames or knights beneath her to be granted new titles as appropriate, Vuni says in a slightly simpering tone. Miles gives Agenda a somewhat perplexed look, and she nods towards the ever-moistening ambassador. He reaches into his coat to take a small breath mint. It will be worn down enough to not be a danger to her in just a few minutes. The overinflated foxwoman was all but spilling her breasts onto him already, and was brushing aside her black hair streaked with cayenne. The slaves are liberated, and will need a lot of food and time with psychiatrists before they can be anything to anyone beyond someone that needs help. On the subject of food, the villages of Portwin, Scaleway, and Shellgather have their boats back, and many of them are using the guns that used to be on them as emplaced defenses and handheld weapons. They've made an oath to endure as best they can. If we extend the titles to their warriors, then they'll fall even deeper in love with our rule. Mercy states out loud, looking to force things along so she can get some if the ambassador was going to get laid. Speaking of people needing help, there are the girls from the organ farm. With euthanasia thoroughly off the table, we need a way to teach them. They're young again, maybe a year or 3 away from puberty, and won't that be fun with hundreds of confused and frightened women? Beck brings up. They number less than half the crew. We'll start a big sister program if we can't find families for these girls. Agenda says simply as if the problem was easily solved, which, to be fair, it is if that plan goes through. Is there a Canador among their number? It would be excellent practice for what's to come, Onyx says as she leans down to both kiss Airfarce and smother him between her breasts. We'll be running a DNA test, facial tests, and other identifiers as best we're able. There is one, but we'll see if we can't find her home and family first, Beck says, and she nods happily.